What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and it is the end of the year. 2023 is now coming to a close, so you know what time it is. It's time for me to reveal my top 5 training shoes of the year. So there are a few things I want to go over before we get going with this video. The first one being that if there is a shoe that is still being sold and it was on a previous video, you can still believe that it is a top pick from me. So something like the Strike Haze, Rad Ones, the Noble Trainer Plus, Go Ruck Ballistic Trainers, those are all still top picks for me. The next thing is that this is just my personal top 5, and I know there are a lot of great training shoes out there and everybody has their own opinion of things. So if you have a different opinion on what your top 5 is, just feel free to let me know in the comment section. The last thing is that I gather all my opinions on these shoes based off of how they do with CrossFit. That is the methodology that I follow, that's what I do. And there's a lot of carryover to other methodologies. If you just did powerlifting, if you just did weightlifting, just general strength training, I think CrossFit kind of encompasses all of those things. And while certain things are gonna be better, your top 5 based off of different methodologies is probably gonna change. But without further ado, let's start talking about the shoes. This year was actually a weird year because nothing really stood out to me as the best training shoe. Usually, for the past few years, there's always been just one shoe that has just stuck out to me. And this year, nothing really jumped out at me. I actually admittedly used a lot of my previous picks this year because nothing just really got my attention as much as the previous 2 years. But there were still some really good shoes. So first off, we're gonna start off with the runners up this year, and the first one is gonna be quite the surprise because it is the Zara Athletics trainers. So this one was sent in to me by a few of you guys out there, and the majority of them being from out of country. I think Zara is just a bigger brand out of country. It's big in the United States as well, but it is just bigger in other parts of the world, especially Europe. And what struck me from this shoe is that it kind of takes a lot of design cues from other shoes and then just kind of puts it into one. It's like AI just took a bunch of things and designed the shoe. And they actually came out with a pretty decent training shoe. The one thing that is really not good about this shoe is that it's really heavy. It's like 14.6 ounces. I think I got the size 11 because there's no half sizes, which is also another not so great thing about this shoe. But it's a wide fitting, stable, actually pretty flexible and comfortable shoe to wear just for training. It's pretty good for lifting. So the real kicker here is that this shoe is available in other parts of the world for like $70. So you can get a fairly competent training shoe, admittedly not the best for body weight or running, but it's actually a pretty decent lifting shoe for well under $100. And this, I think, can go pretty much toe-to-toe with most of the shoes on today's list. Now, the problem about this shoe and why I can't really recommend it in the United States is because they stopped selling it here. So shortly after I bought it, started using it, they took it off the US site and you can't buy this in the United States anymore. But if you're in another part of the world and they still sell it, definitely recommend it for 70 bucks, 70 US dollars. This is a bargain training shoe that does pretty good. So the next shoe is a shoe that I wear very often, and it's because it's something that's easy to throw on. It's pretty low key, kind of goes with anything, and you can also train in it. And that is the Noble Rec Trainer. This is one of my favorite shoes this year because you could just use it for everything. It's Noble's version of like a pair of Vans, and they did a really good job with it. It's very comfortable. It's a lot lighter than a pair of Vans are. It's stable, it's flexible. You could wear it out of the gym, you could wear it in the gym. It's like the perfect travel shoe. I wore this to a club in Vegas. And then, yeah, you can go hit some weights afterwards. Now, the reason why I didn't put it on as one of the top 5s is because it is not the best training shoe. It's just a versatile shoe that you can use for pretty much anything. Another thing I don't really like about it is that I think it costs a little too much for what it is. It's also not durable for rope climbs. All right, so the last shoe that we're gonna talk about before we get into things is the Nike Metcon 9. And I kind of went back and forth between putting this in and leaving it out, but there's just some glaring flaws with this shoe that make me want to choose pretty much anything else in this video over the Metcon 9. So first off, the things that it does well is that it's the widest Metcon since the Metcon 6. It's a really comfortable shoe. The cushioning is comfortable. It's got a wide, nice fit. Ankle collar is great. Now, what's not so great about it is that it is the heaviest Metcon yet. It's almost 14 ounces for a men's size 10.5. The newfound flexibility and comfort is negated by just how heavy and clunky the shoe feels. It's also not super responsive. The midsole foam, it might be just a little bit too soft. It's stable when you land because of the really wide platform, but it's a little bit mushy when you do deadlifts and back squats. And the worst thing about this shoe is that it runs super hot, which is great right now in the winter months, but when it's the dead heat of summer, these are really uncomfortable to have on. The last thing is that they cost $150, which is a $20 increase over the Metcon 8s, which are still available and still a really good training shoe. All right, so now that all the runners up are out of the way, we can finally get into the top 5 training shoes. The 5th pick being the Under Armour TriBase Rain 5. These came out really, like late in 2022, but since they're planned for the 2023 year, I include them in the next year. And these ones I used a lot very early on in the year, and I really loved. I think the improvements that they made between the 4 and the 5 are all positive. I know some people don't like the tongue, but I really like the fit around the ankle collar in this shoe. It's really comfortable. The midsole cushioning in the shoe has been improved over the previous models, and it's a little bit thicker. So some people aren't gonna like that, but I personally really like that about the shoe. It made the shoe have a really nice underfoot feel. This still has a 2mm drop, which I also really like. The only thing I didn't really like about the shoe was that the toe can kind of feel a little bit floaty at times when you're hunkered down at the heel part of the shoe, but overall, I never found that that was a hindrance in the majority of my lifts. It's just something that you would have to adjust for. Overall, I think that these are the best effort in a training shoe from Under Armour to date, and these could probably be someone else's number 1 pick. All right, so the number 4 pick is going to go to the Nike Free Metcon 5. This is the definitive version of the Free line of shoes, and while it is not the most stable out of all the shoes today, it's never really been meant to be the stable shoe. It's meant to be flexible, but still stable enough to handle the majority of your lifts. I was able to clean up to like 90% of my 1 rep max in the Free Metcons. And while it was not optimal, I still was able to do it. I'm still able to squat pretty well in these shoes. They do have that 8mm drop. There is still a good amount of midsole foam in these shoes, but it seems like they made it a little bit more dense in comparison to the previous years. The biggest improvement with this shoe over the past models is that they really flattened it out. There's very little toe spring on the shoe. The rocker is still there. The heel has still got that stay construction, but the toe of the shoe is just a lot easier to control. And these are still really flexible. They're great for body weight workouts. They're extremely versatile. They're one of the better Metcon shoes if you're not throwing around big weights or you're not doing heavy deadlifts because of that 8mm drop. But I think for the majority of the stuff that you're gonna do on a day-to-day basis, the Free Metcon 5s are gonna handle it just fine. Just don't rope climb in the shoes because it does not work. All right, so the number 3 pick for 2023 is going to the Adidas Dropset 2. These, compared to the original Dropset release, are a massive upgrade in just about every single way. These are wide, they're flexible, they're really breathable. They're not that light, but because of just how flexible and breathable these shoes feel, it makes them feel a lot lighter than they actually are. They fall pretty much in line with every other shoe in this lineup at like right about 13 ounces for a men's size 10.5. But they feel much lighter than that. Another thing that people are gonna really like about the Adidas Dropsets is that they have the widest toe box out of all the shoes that we're talking about today. And not only that, there's also space on top of your toes. So the toe box just feels wide and open, but not so much so that it ever feels too sloppy. The dual density midsole on this shoe is also great. You've got a softer forefoot foam, you got a more dense heel foam, and they are still pretty flexible and actually pretty decent to run in. Now the cons about this shoe are that it's not the greatest of rope climbing shoes, though it does have some kind of sidewall to protect it, give it a little bit of durability. I didn't find that the grip on these was that great. And if you live in a wetter climate, you're probably gonna get your feet wet because of the open ventilation at the very bottom of the shoe. So don't go jumping around in puddles. Make sure to keep these inside the gym. But a really great effort from Adidas with the Dropset 2. All right, now we're getting somewhere. The second pick for 2023 goes to the Born Primitive Savage 1s. These are overall a versatile, excellent training shoe, and I really went back and forth between putting this as my number one, and the only reason why I did not put this as my number one shoe is because if you put me in a CrossFit competition, I would have felt a little bit more comfortable wearing the number one pick. But for my day-to-day training, for just about everything I do inside the gym, the Savage 1s are gonna handle that just fine. When talking to the people over at Born Primitive, they told me they channeled a classic CrossFit shoe that people loved when coming up with the Savage 1s. They've got a wide toe box, just a little bit less wide than the Dropset 2s. They've got a 4mm drop with a minimal stack. The midsole on the shoe is actually a lot better than said classic CrossFit shoe. The stability of the shoe is also better than the older CrossFit shoe as well. The shoe feels like a modern take on a classic design, and if you're somebody that came from the old school ways of CrossFit, then there's no way that you're gonna dislike the Savage 1s. This is one of the most versatile shoes out here, and for a first effort, I really commend Born Primitive with coming out with such a great shoe. All right, now the moment you've been waiting for, my number one training shoe pick of 2023 is going to the Reebok Nano 13. And like I said, it was a tough battle, and it really came down to the wire this year. I was like very close in picking the Savage 1s over the Nano 13s, and the reason why I went with the Nano 13s over the Savage 1s was because if you were to put me in a competition with money on the line, I would choose the Nano 13s because I feel like they are just the better lifting shoe and just better in the box competition type shoe. Now I get that we don't compete every single day, but if you were to pick something based off of just pure performance, I think the Nano 13 is just the overall better performing shoe, bar running, because these are not the greatest running shoe. Though what I will say is that they are flexible enough for just about anything else. Box jumps, burpees, like I said, anything that you're gonna find in the box, the Nano 13s are gonna be totally adequate for. They're flexible enough for that stuff. The weight doesn't really bog them down. They're admittedly not the lightest of the bunch, but they're also not the heaviest of the bunch. They're just kind of in line with the rest of the shoes. They are an extremely durable shoe. These have been through hell and back. This is my original review pair. I've used this for countless rope climbs. These are my go-to rope climbing shoe. The grip on them is excellent. They basically don't even show any wear, and I don't think that that is gonna change anytime soon. I'll probably keep these for a couple more years and just try to burn them out from rope climbs. Now the place that the Nano 13s really shine is that they are just the most stable shoe out of all of these shoes that we're talking about today. You can squat in them. Deadlifting is obviously not gonna be the greatest because they have the 7mm drop. They've got the float ride midsole, but it's also not that bad either. These are probably the best Olympic weightlifting shoe out of all of these. They've got a really flat, stable base. The heel height comes in as a mechanical advantage. It's not a squishy heel at all. The toe contact is good on these shoes. just overall, these are a really solid lifting shoe, whether it's barbell cycling, Olympic weightlifting, and even maybe powerlifting if you just wanted to squat and bench, maybe not deadlift. To me, these are just the most well-rounded out of all the shoes that we're talking about today. So if you could only have one pair of CrossFit shoes, the Nano 13s are gonna be my pick. Plus, there's a lot of different options out there of the Nano 13. You can get the Nano Classics, which are actually probably my favorite because they're a little bit more flexible and soft than the normal Nano 13. And then you can also get the Nano 13 Adventure if you wanted to do some out-of-the-box training. You can get the Nano 13 Winters if you're in a colder climate. You can get the Froning Nano 13s if you like Froning. I don't think that those are the best ones, but they are a cool shoe. But when it all comes down to it, the best version of the Nano 13 is just the normal version of it. And like I said, if you could only pick one shoe for CrossFit out of all of these shoes, it's probably gonna be the Nano 13 for me. And that pretty much wraps it up. Like I said before, your top 5 might look a lot different than my top 5 does. So if it does, leave your picks in the comment section below. And another thing to go along with this is that any of these shoes are all top training shoe picks. You can buy one of these shoes and rest assured that you're gonna have a completely competent training shoe. It just really depends on your own personal preferences. So it's been a great 2023 and I hope you guys have another great year in 2024. Thanks for following all of these years and watching my videos. If you guys like this one, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Happy New Year's.